So the next type of plant that I talked about, I believe, was the rosette. Now the rosette, again, let's say your Amazon swords. Sorry, it left me there. So your Amazon sword, you've got your one main root base, and then you've got all of your leaves coming up from that one main root base. Now, if you're looking to propagate, there's two methods of propagation for these, so I'll get that out of the way quickly. Amazon swords, especially, to keep it in that realm, if they're getting really healthy and you've got a nice mother plant growing, it will start sending out long runners that will start throwing off these new little plants up there. Now, as these develop and grow, you can just cut them off and take these and replant them, and voila, you've got a whole new plant. And with these runners, as well as with the stems, if you've got old growth or deficient growth, you want to keep it in check. So the best things you can do then is, again, start to trim off. Now, trimming off something like a sword plant or those rosettes that are growing from that single root base, it's quite easy. You find the one leaf that you want to get rid of, and you trace it down. And sometimes, keep your hand on it and follow it all the way down, because it can be sort of a jungle and a little bit hard to just sort of eye it out from the side. So you follow yourself right down as close to that root base as you can get, and just lop it off. Take that out and toss it in the trash. Rarely is it going to reroot from a leaf. Rarely. I've seen some people manage to do it. I've tried a few times. I've had middling successes, but in most cases, no. It's just going to die off. You can't necessarily reroot from that as sort of a general rule of thumb. Lop it off, throw it in the trash. By getting rid of those dying leaves, or getting rid of old growth, it allows the plant to send more energy to the new growth. You want to cut it off as close to the bottom as you can, because again, if you cut it up higher along the way, you're going to be left with these stems, and one, they're ugly. Two, they will start to decay, and by having this decaying, it also opens the plant up to the possibility of disease. As the plant is sending energy to these dying stems, it's not sending the energy to the new healthy leaves that it needs to be. So cut it off as close to the bottom as you possibly can, toss it out, and the new growth will come. Now, what you can also do if you want to propagate it even further is take this crown right here and take a good sharp pair of scissors or an X-Acto knife or something that's nice and sharp, and just hack it right down the middle. Cut that crown in half, making sure that there is a good root base at the bottom of each side of the crown that you're cutting off, and split them off, and then again replant it as you would, and you've got yourself yet another mature plant. Or give it to someone that's looking for it. Sell it if you want. I usually suggest, if you're looking to propagate for selling and you're splitting at the crown like that you plant it back in your tank for a little while, just to allow it to get healthier, because you are of course going to shock the plant a little bit by doing this. Now, the next one that I was talking about was carpeting plants. So say, like I said, like your HC Cuba or your Monte Carlo, you've got these little, which you've got your carpeting bundle, which, as I said, if you look close, it does resemble a stem in some ways, because you have these little shoots and runners that typically do have little node points, and they go along. Now, with again, as I said, I'll cover it more in depth in another video, but if you've got the right parameters going, the vertical growth can be coaxed into horizontal growth or creeping growth, which will help your carpet spread. So right now I'm just talking about, again, trimming it down. You've got your carpet starting to grow in, or it's grown in already, and it's filled up like this. very simple with carpet plants is hack it back. You know, you can take the time to manicure it and make it, you know, keep it following the form of your aquascape, depending on how wild or how manicured you want it to be. So maybe hack it off is not necessarily the right term, but gently. A lot of carpeting plants don't necessarily have a deep, strong root base at all times, and don't necessarily hold on. So sometimes if you're a little bit too violent in your cutting, then you risk pulling up clumps. Now, I mean, don't panic if you do that. Just stuff her back into the substrate and it will catch hold again. But just save yourself the heartache and be gentle about it, and just, you know, trim off with a little bit of finesse. You know, so with carpeting plant, really, you're just choosing your height that you want to trim, and you're going to, yep, literally just cut it off. Now, what you can do with these trimmings is you can either replant them, you know, and try and fill in some of your patches so that you can have, you know, a little bit more carpet growing in quicker. You can replant it in another tank. You can put it into an immersed situation, which I like to do, is take my carpeting trimmings and grow them then immersed, which again, that'll be covered a little bit more in depth in another video, but that way I can propagate it outside of the tank with more open areas, so I've always got a bunch of it ready when I want to start doing another scape. Now, by trimming these, as I said, aside from being able to replant the trimmings, trimming your carpeting plants is good for two things in specific. One, as I said, it forces the plant to want to put out further runners, which will help fill in your carpet and thicken that up so you get that full long effect. But also, as your carpet starts to get thick, it's the same thing like I said with the stem plants, is that if it gets too thick, there's not enough light penetration getting down to the bottom, and you can start to have root die off and lower levels dying off, and then eventually this will either kill off your entire carpet, or it'll allow it to just break free from your substrate, and then you got to go through the habit of packing it all down and trying to regrow it and reestablish your carpet. So to avoid that, keep it nice and trimmed. Like I said, it can be really nicely manicured, or it can just be, you know, sort of cut at willy-nilly to maintain a bit more of a wild effect, depending on what sort of aquascape you're looking for. But it definitely has a benefit of, you know, allowing the plant to continue to grow in a healthy manner. Now, that was for something like your Cuba or your Monte Carlo, your baby tier or clover-like sort of plants. Now, one of the other carpeting plants is using grasses. Again, as I sort of split it off from the beginning, I'll put grasses and valves into the same category, because they are all basically grass, you know, in one form or another. Some are taller, you know, and some are mid, some are shorter, but essentially you've all got them growing along from one root base, and they're putting out runners and trying to fill in that space. Now, as these are growing out and putting out their runners and everything, taking up a little bit more space, the point of trimming the plants is, again, twofold. One, to keep them in check, keep them where you want them to be, with something like a jungle val or some of the taller val scenario that can really grow up to the top, to the point where it's, you know, it's really bending over, taking over your tank. If that's not the look that you want to have, and you don't want that full sort of spiraling, you can just trim the tops. Simply cut it off where you want it to be. Now, again, if you've got the right parameters in your tank, you know, yes, this is going to shock the plant a little bit, but if you've got the right parameters in your tank, it's not going to start rotting at that tip, and it's not going to die off, and it will start to maintain where it is and then grow up again. Some people have reported problems. I've had it in the past when, you know, my parameters just weren't correct, and I've trimmed off the top of valves and had them die right back down, that one leaf or that one blade. But once, if everything is in check or in proper balance, you shouldn't run into those issues. Because again, even though these are aquatic or semi-aquatic, it is still grass, and we mow our lawn. you know, and typically when we mow our lawn, it doesn't die right off. So with your dwarf hair grass or your larger sages or your vallisneria, in all the same way, you can trim off the top. One, again, to keep it where you want it to be manicured, but also by trimming off the top, again, it coaxes the plant into putting out further runners and filling out the areas that you want it to fill out. Now, someone told me recently that you can fill in areas of your carpeting by trimming those runners, and that the runners will bifurcate much in the same way that stem plants will. I haven't tried that yet. I've heard no specific reports or instruction on doing it that way. It does tend to make sense. I'm curious about it. I'm going to do a little experiment myself. If you've done that and it's worked for you, please do comment below and let me know, you know, what your experiences are with that, or comment on whatever forum you're seeing this on, because, you know, I'm really curious about that myself. So lastly, then, we have the rhizome-based plants, which, again, just for the sake of discussion, because one of the more common ones that most people in either the low-tech or the high-tech have experience with is, say, your Java fern. So that's why my little picture is going to be of my Java fern. Now, again, Anubias, Bulbitis, Bucephalandra, all rhizome-based, basically the same concept. So you've got your rhizome, which is, for lack of a better term, your main stem or your main root that your leaves are growing out from, and you've got them growing really well, wonderful. Now, your plants can start to, for propagation purposes, some of your ferns can start to, you know, produce little plantlets at the end, and you'll see this die back slowly as this is producing plantlets with a new little rhizome on it. And what you can do with those little plantlets with the new little rhizome is just take them off, stick them somewhere else, and they'll keep growing and you'll have a new plant. And that's one way that this propagates. The other way that you can propagate, again, is just by finding the rhizome, and again, with a really nice sharp pair of scissors or a sharp X-Acto knife or something, is just find a place, cut the rhizome, then you've got two plants, they'll start to grow out. Again, I can't stress enough that you want to make sure it's a really nice sharp blade that you're using, because if you have something that's leaving behind a really jagged cut, that's really distressing the plant. And again, that opens the end of the rhizome up to decay and possible disease, and your whole plant is going to die off. If you have a nice clean cut, again, preferably on a bias, it does allow the plant to continue to grow, and for the rhizome to, again, to continue to grow out and produce more plants. Now, if you're finding, again, you've got algae covered leaves that you just can't deal with, or deficient leaves, or just dying because they're getting old and you just want to get rid of them, same thing with the rosettes. You just want to trim them off close to the rhizome without cutting the rhizome, pluck them out and toss them, because again, you're not going to be able to reroot from the plants, like I said, unless you happen to have plantlets growing off at the end. So again, to keep your shape for how you want to grow, you know, you can trim this to manicure it to keep your flow in your aquascape the way you want, or just to keep the plant growing healthy. You know, hack that off, toss the bunch out. Same thing with Anubias. You know, you can split at the rhizome, plant new stuff wherever it goes. Again, remember, I'm sure all of you know this, never bury a rhizome in the substrate. Either attach it to driftwood, attach it to a rock, or have it sitting just on top of your substrate with your roots going down into it. But never bury that rhizome, because if you bury that rhizome, it's going to rot, it's going to die, you're going to lose your plant. So that's it for this installment. You know, thank you very much for watching again. Again, basically, you know, you're cutting to propagate, make your stem plants much more luminous and lush, make your carpets carpet, keep your rosettes looking healthy and maintained, and keeping your rhizome propagated and growing where you want it to be, and keeping your mosses manicured, healthy, and maintained. That's the reason that we cut. Keep it looking good, keep it growing healthy. As long as all of your other parameters in place, you know, Good trimming techniques go a long way to helping your tank maintain its healthy appearance and just that beautiful layout that you spend so much time doing. So have fun with it. Again, most of you may have already known this. Some of you who are new may not have. Some of you who have been doing it for a while might have forgotten about this, or still just were wondering, well, I've moved from a jungle tank where I just grew wild, but now I'm looking for something a little bit more manicured, so what can I do? So hopefully this gave you some information on how to continue. So again, as always, please do hit subscribe down below. Questions, comments along the way. I love the feedback from people, and I like interacting, so yeah, feel free, hit me up, comments below or on the forums or something like that. I do enjoy it. Again, more great stuff coming up. I've got another segment coming up in the elements of design. We're going to be talking again a little bit more about the further advanced use of the rule of thirds, as well as Escape that I've got working on, and I'm going to be building myself a couple tanks. I'll probably do a video on that, doing a tank build for you, because I've got some ideas for Escape and I need a very specific set of parameters for my tank, and I just can't get it commercially, so I'm going to build it, and I'll probably show you that step by step, right from getting my glass and cutting it and putting the tank together and doing Escape. So again, a lot of stuff to look forward to.